As a realtor, you can't be in this business without being asked a ton of questions. Real estate questions. It's the Real Estate Show. Welcome to the Real Estate Show. My name is Rick Naples. I am the owner-broker of Zone Realty LLC. You zone your home. Questions. There's no good questions. There's no bad questions. Questions are questions. And there's a lot of them when it comes to real estate. From people that are experienced in selling real estate, maybe they've had a home and they've sold it and bought another home, to folks that are just starting to get into the real estate market. There's also questions that come from people that are looking to get into real estate as a career. Now, as a broker for many years, I field a lot of questions. And there are some common ones I'm constantly asked. One of the biggest questions I'm always asked when people find out I'm a realtor is, how's the market doing? And of course, the answer to that is, are you looking to buy or sell? Markets are interesting to talk about because you never know if those markets are going to be strong, if they're weak, if it's a seller market, a buyer market, or what the situation is going to be. But the more common questions are the questions that come from the first timers, the folks that are just looking to get into the real estate market or perhaps buy their first house. And it always starts off with, well, I want to buy a house. How do I begin? How do I start? What do I do? And I've talked about that a lot on the Real Estate Show. You need to get everything in line and you need to be prepared. So the first thing that you want to do is talk to a mortgage officer and see if you can qualify for a mortgage. It's not going to help you at all to go shopping for a house if you don't know what you can afford, if you don't know whether or not you're going to be able to obtain a mortgage. So you have to talk to a mortgage officer in order to get pre-qualified or pre-approved for a mortgage amount. We can worry about attaching the house to that later on. Now, it's important that you prepare to do that. So you've got to have all your ducks in a row, as they say. Make sure that you have your income up to date. Make sure you have your debts up to date, and so on and so forth. Now, the follow-up question is, well, once I do all that, how much will I need for a down payment? Traditionally, down payments have always been around 20% of the purchase price of the house. But that's no longer true. There are a lot of programs that are out there that need far less than 20% down. And again, this is why you want to start with talking to a mortgage officer. So you know what kind of programs that are out there and how much monies you're going to need for down payments. And you also have to have a conversation about closing costs. A lot of newbers don't think about closing costs and what those are. Those can be anywhere from 3 to 5% of the sales price of a house, depending on when you're closing and what's involved. So you want to make sure that you know what your closing costs are going to be in addition to what your down payment is going to be. Another question is, well, once I find a house and I make an offer and my offer goes to the seller, what happens if the seller doesn't take my offer? Well, that's a whole nother conversation. So first, let's look at this presentation, and I'll be back to talk about more real estate questions. There are a lot of different real estate questions that are asked, and they run the gamut from the very simple ones, as I started talking about at the beginning of the show, to the very involved questions. But no question is a bad question, and that's one of the things that realtors do. They're there to answer questions. They're there for you to give you information. You want to make sure that you write down the questions you want to ask, because you're going to have a lot of them. And the real estate transaction is not a transaction that just happens overnight. It takes time. And that's another question, folks, that I'm always asked. How long does it take to buy a house? Now, that's a question that's pretty hard to answer because it depends. There's so many different factors that are involved. There's so many different people that get involved in order to make a real estate transaction happen. You know, it's not just you and the seller. It's you and your real estate agent and the seller's agent and the seller and the respective attorneys on both sides, home inspectors, appraisals, mortgage underwriters, insurance agents. There's a lot of people that get involved in order to make a real estate transaction come to the end and be able to close. So how long is it going to take? Well, there's articles out there that say the average person, when they're looking to buy a house, will search for about 10 to 12 weeks. Basically, they're looking on the internet, they're signing up with a realtor, they're going out, they're looking at houses, they're going to open houses, and so on and so forth. But about 10 to 12 weeks before you find something that you want to buy. And then once you make your offer, if the offer is accepted by the seller, you now could be looking at another 30 to 45 days or longer in order to get to the closing table. And that's because of all the different people that are involved and all the different steps that need to happen in order to close the deal. Now, one of the side questions that comes up is, well, if I make an offer on a house, how much money do I give the seller? Well, that's called an escrow deposit. It's a good faith amount of money that just basically says you're serious in buying the house. But the realtor's job is to protect you, is to make sure that you don't expose yourself too far into the deal before you actually have a mortgage approval. So a lot of times the recommendation for an escrow deposit is anywhere from, say, 1 to 2% of the selling price. To make it simple, a lot of realtors will say, we'll write an offer and we'll offer a $500 deposit to get the deal going, or if it's a more expensive house, it might be $1,000 or $2,000. Now, what happens to that escrow money? Well, that escrow money doesn't go anywhere unless the deal is accepted. If the seller accepts the offer, that escrow money is then going to go to the escrow holder, usually the listing agency, and they're going to put it in a non-interest bearing account where it will sit until the actual closing. So your money doesn't actually get into the seller's hands until you get to that closing table. And there's a reason behind that. It's because the deal hasn't closed yet. The transaction has not yet completed. So you don't want money to exchange hands just yet. Now, if the deal falls apart anytime while the transaction is being put together, there are different procedures in getting that money back, and that's something you can talk to your realtor about. Let's take a look at this another series that I put together on some additional questions that come up when you're looking at real estate. The real estate transaction can be very simple. It can be very complicated. It depends on what you're buying. Now, I've also been asked a question once the deal is accepted, is I've gone through the house. I've looked at it. I've been there with my friends. We've gone to the open house and so on and so forth. So I've been in the house. So why do I need to get all these other people involved? I mean, what do I need a home inspection for? What do I need an appraisal for? I mean, I know what I'm buying, right? Well, the fact is, no, you don't. You're not an expert as a buyer as to what all the code regulations are or what a house needs to be in order to do a transaction and purchase that particular home. Or even if it's a house that's in foreclosure or it's a house that needs a lot of repair, you still want to have someone that is trained in seeing the things that need to be done look at the house, and those are the home inspectors. So if I'm ever asked the question, do I need a home inspector? I'm pretty expert, I can do a lot of stuff myself. Well, the bottom line is yes, you should have a home inspection done. It's well worth the money. I mean, you usually don't purchase a car unless you take it for a test drive first, or maybe have a mechanic take a look at it. Well, look at houses the same way. The home inspector is going to go through the house from top to bottom and provide you with a report so you actually know what you're buying. Now, the flip side of that is, why is there an appraisal? Well, if you're getting a mortgage loan, the bank needs to know if the house is worth the mortgage they're going to put on it. Not only you qualifying for the mortgage to make the payments, but is their investment going to be safe? So an appraisal has to be involved. Those things are very, very important. There's another thing that you need to consider, and that is representation. Now, you're going to be working with a buyer's agent if you're buying a home, or a selling agent if you're listing and selling your home, and they're going to guide you through the transaction. But they are not legal counsel. So you need to get an attorney involved. Seller's going to have an attorney. Bank's going to have an attorney. You as a buyer needs to have an attorney. The attorney is going to check all the balances, check everything that's been worded, making sure that you're safe and this transaction is going to go through, and that all the questions legally are addressed and answered. Your realtor is going to get involved in the deal when it comes to the negotiation of the sale, perhaps with negotiating on things that need to be repaired and so on and so forth. But the attorney is really key because they're going to protect you legally when this transaction happens. And they get involved in things like title insurance and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of people, as I said, that get involved. Let's take a look at this final presentation, and I'll be back with some final thoughts on real estate questions. Those are just some of the questions that come up when it comes to a real estate transaction. The bottom line simply is there's a lot more questions. So I always say, don't be afraid to ask a question. Even if you feel the question is far-fetched or maybe out there in left field somewhere, you still want to ask questions. Now, one of the harder questions for realtors to ask is what I call the what-if question. Well, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if this scenario goes down? There's not a straight answer to that question. It's very difficult to answer because you've got to wait until that situation has. All I can say is that the what if scenario happens, usually you're prepared to address that situation if you followed all the regulations and all the different steps that you need to go through in order to put a transaction together. Now again, the realtor that you're working with has been trained and has the expertise to be able to guide you through those what-if situations. Now I've had a few big what-if situations in my real estate career, things that we never expected to happen, surprises sometimes. I've had houses catch on fire and burn down the day before the closing. So there's a lot of things that can happen, but you don't want to worry about those. You want to follow the directions of your realtor, follow the steps of the transaction, go through the negotiations, and get the different people involved that you need so that you can get to the closing table and either sell your home or be able to buy a home. Transfer those keys and move on to the next step in life. tough to answer. What if something goes wrong during the transaction? What happens if the deal falls apart? Do I get my money back? What happens if I close on a deal and I move into the house and then I discover something that wasn't disclosed about the property? What if? Again, don't worry about all those different situations. You want to make sure that you put everything together to go through the real estate transaction, and hopefully there will be no what ifs. My name is Rick Naples, and this has been The Real Estate Show. I thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and steak entrees for 34 years, offering 3 cozy dining room settings, a newly renovated pub with craft beer, wine by the glass, specialty cocktails, and a lighter fare menu. Open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42, and gift certificates are also available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of Route 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lynn.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name's Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time,